Welcome to the Culture of Agriculture, brought to you by Sputnik Equipment. Well, we'd like to welcome everyone back to the Culture of Agriculture, sponsored by Sputnik Equipment. We're in Blackfoot today. We've got Gary Farmer with us from Valleywide Ag. We enjoyed the good visit we had last spring, so we're kind of going to recap a few things this spring again and kind of see, kind of compare some notes. And we also have Andy Torski with us today. He works for Sputnik as the Western Regional Sales Manager, and then I'm Brent Rigby. I will be your host today. So we're grateful for you guys taking the time to come and to visit, and we're excited to kind of discuss a little bit of what we talked about a year ago, and maybe kind of see some of the things we finished up last year, and then what we kind of anticipate this year.
You're kind of the godfather of the industry.
Oh, yeah. No, just been around a long time. Kind of like the dirt clod of the industry.
How many years?
I've been involved with this for well over 40 years now.
Wow.
So,
I'm close.
So how many more years?
how
many more seasons?
I think about 4 or 5 at least.
4 or 5.
I like it. It's kind of a fun thing to do, especially now that the market's so nice. But
Yes. This has been an exciting year for the market.
it's been a year for the ages, considering everything that's weather related and market related. It's been pretty interesting.
So over your 40 years, looking at the last 2, well, let's go 3. We've had a unique 3 years as far as being totally different 3 years ago to last year to what this year's looking at. What's some of your perspective going forward on what you're kind of anticipating this year of what you see with the weather, the water situation?
Well, we went from one of the driest winters we've had to one of the wettest winters we have. We went from a market that was precariously non-profitable to heights that we've never seen. I was talking with a grower this morning, and he was talking about some of the deals that he's involved with right now, and he's been in this industry for 60 plus years, and not even close. It's funny how that is, and so it's different. It's really different.
But the interesting part is I think, like you were saying, we've gone from probably the least profitable to one of the more profitable.
Right.
But even though we're high on the profitability side, our inputs and everything with what we've got going on have made a big impact on what those profits could really have been.
Exactly.
My history of been in this industry, I've never seen prices like this before.
Yeah.
Flat crazy.
Yeah, I think about the last time I remember about $18 or $19, you know, for a fresh packed potato back in the late 80s there. Mm-hmm. And we really haven't hit that till now again, this last fall.
I had a grower here years back. We were talking about it. It was back that one year. I think the prices got up to close to $18.
Yep.
I was talking with this grower, and it was really funny because he says, "I'll never ever sell a spud for $18." And I go, "What?" And he said, "That means I'd have to say no to 15. I'd have to say no to 10, and then $5 was a good price." And that just tells you how uniquely different we're at right now.
Yes. Yep.
It is.
Exactly.
So,
But I think it's taking some of these prices, and I think that's one thing. We hear a lot of these big prices, but when you start to look at the cost of production and the cost of what it takes to put a crop in, as well as your overhead, these bigger prices really aren't as big as what it looks like on the outside.
I would say you could liken it to a $10 or $11 price that we saw, 10 years ago.
Yep.
So out of your 40 years, what's the lowest price you remember?
I've got another sad story. I remember my family used to come up during the winter, and I'd always call one of my growers to see if we could buy some spuds off the face of one of his piles of spuds in his cellar. And I remember at that time, I think prices, maybe, I think I paid the grower $8 or $9 for every sack of spuds we got off the face of this pile. And it turned out to be, at that time, maybe a couple $100 worth of spuds that we'd bagged up, and he ended up dumping that entire cellar. So I told my sisters and brothers that were involved in this, is we could have bought that entire cellar. That's how sad and how pathetic it was.
I do remember that.
And it wasn't because the spuds were bad. He was just, the market just eroded to a point where you couldn't get anything for them.
Yeah, you thought the market was going to go up and it went
Right.
down.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I can remember many, many years of, dollar potatoes.
$1.50.
Yep. And one thing I hope is that the new norm, and I'm talking the base price of the spud, I hope it's readjusted itself. We used to talk about, if I could get $4, that was great. And then it came up to $5. And then, the last few years prior to these last 2 years, $7, $8 might pay the bills.
Yep, right.
And we're so far beyond that now. And I'm thinking, and I hope that new low has been reset to at least $10 or $11 in a sack, because I think that's closer to where our production costs are.
Yep, and
I
I
agree.
think I think you and I and Corey were talking the other morning
Right.
for a minute, and we were kind of calculating your cost of plant is probably somewhere around that $300 to $3,500 an
Exactly
acre,
right.
and that doesn't count overhead. That's just your production side. So yeah, you have a 350 sack crop,
Yeah.
which you hope we do better than that.
That's
But-
$10. You got to
Yeah,
get $10
that's
for
$10.
them. And that's and everything seems to come up really easily for price, but it doesn't seem to go down that well. And thank heavens we're seeing a significant drop in the fertilizer industry, and so that's good, and that's going to help. But there's so many other factors that go along with that, and some of these things I just think they're the new highs and they're going to stay there, I'm afraid.
It's like you say, a lot of times that stuff doesn't drop
Right,
easily.
exactly.
So, yep.
Fun.
Well, give us maybe a little bit of a finish last year, after we chatted and kind of were speculating on some things from last year. What kind of finishing up last year, how did you feel? What did you kind of see?
Well, I think of the years that I've been involved, I think we got our crop in earlier than we ever did last year. And so I can't even think of a potato that was planted in May, and most of them were done by the 25th of April last year. And we had high hopes that we were just going to have this phenomenal crop, and then the weather just went south on us, as you guys know, and I had potato fields that took 7 weeks to get out of the ground. And so, that in itself introduces a whole unique set of stresses and concerns. And then from that point on, we went to record highs, which we saw from the year prior to that's not a very good situation either. And the end result was, I think we had one of our poorest yielding crops in a long time.
That was even worse than the year before, where we
Right.
had the smoke
Right.
issue.
That's a good point. Although I would say that our quality, I think we learned some things in 2021 that helped us combat the 2022 heat, but we didn't have the tuber numbers, and everything was late coming. We had good quality, but the size was a little off, and the yields certainly were.
So do you think, obviously being in the ground that long, not coming out, that probably affected a little bit of the vigor of the plant itself?
No question about that. It's kind of a time clock when it comes to plant vigor, and so it takes a lot more energy if it has to linger in that kind of environment to finally get out of the ground. So I think you'd be safe to say that some of the potential energy or vigor of that plant had been compromised because of that.
And that might have started us off
Right.
in that direction of probably the yield and the sets and that kind of stuff to
I
come.
think one of the things that was really problematic, as it was in 2021, was that also pushes back the time of the year that we start initiating tubers. And unfortunately, Mother Nature didn't cooperate. We went from cold to excessively hot, and so we had issues trying to initiate tubers as well, generally speaking. So
No cold mornings was gone.
Right.
It's straight warm.
So, and following up with what we talked about last year, and the environmental conditions that need to exist at tuber initiation, we just didn't have them again. And we started behind, and we never got anything out of it.
We never did gain ground
Right,
like
exactly.
we thought we would do. And then we had that late heat,
Oh, I know.
you know, that we usually are not. I mean, it felt like we should have been cutting grain in that time. That's when usually the heat's in there in August, and we got it in September.
Yeah, it was a beautiful fall, though. I have to. No complaints. No complaints.
Yeah, no frost. It was one of the, out of all my years, it was the nicest fall I've ever seen.
Exactly. Me too.
And to a certain point, we were really glad that we were able to dig them in nice
got 'em
condition.
done quick and
Yeah,
everything.
and I know a lot of times across the country we were battling a little bit of heat,
Really.
you know, to dig and get them in and cool them off.
So it wasn't just our area then.
No,
No, it was.
everywhere.
It seemed like it was across. I mean, we had several areas that were very late planting last spring because of the weather as well. So it was kind of all the way across. Seemed like it was more to the west as we traveled. The west seemed to struggle more with the cooler spring coming in, and then as you got kind of in the middle part of the country, they seemed to do okay. And then clear onto the east, they had a good crop out in like in the Maine and New Brunswick and that area. But they had a little more normal year.
Well, that's interesting. At the end of the day, we are complete victims of what Mother Nature throws our way.
Oh, yeah.
Even though you plan, huh?
Oh, absolutely. It's so frustrating.
Yeah.
And,
Because we were talking last year, you know, get the seed, we started out dry the year before.
Right.
So we wanted to make sure that we had enough moisture in there for the seed to get going.
Yeah. Mother Nature will make the most haughty and arrogant person pretty humble. And it sure did that in the last 2 years, that's for sure.
Yes, indeed. Well, looking into this year already with kind of the situation, we're actually going to go in pretty good with ground moisture,
Absolutely.
where we didn't last year. Obviously we're a little late, but what would you recommend as far as planting? I know we're all excited to get going.
Well, that's an interesting question, and I've had a lot of conversations with people in the industry. I mean, obviously we're going to be a lot later than last year. I had growers who a week ago today had already planted all their spring grain. I mean, we're significantly later. I suspect there's probably a couple people down in the south end of the reservation that have probably put a few acres of spuds in. I don't know for sure, but north of Blackfoot and Blackfoot, we're at least 7 to 10 days behind last year's pace. The soil temperatures are starting to warm up, and that's an interesting thing too, because the heat capacity of the ambient air is a lot different than, let's just say, moisture. So the higher the moisture, the slower we have. It takes more energy to heat that soil up. And so we're in that situation, and it doesn't seem to matter. You know, obviously sand, because it has so much pore space and a lot less water holding capacity, it's going to obviously heat up a lot faster than the heavier soils. And so I think we'll be a little bit more normal when it comes to soil temperatures in the sandier fields, but these heavier fields, it's going to be a while before they warm up, and I'm a little bit concerned with that. Another observation that I've seen now that people have started to cut seed is the profile, and we know that seed's really short this year, but the profile of almost every lot of seed I've seen is small, which I like, but I've seen some that are almost too small, struggling to get our average seed weight up to even 2 ounces.
Because like they're almost keeping the slivers and everything else, trying to get whatever they can get out.
Yeah, and so that's going to be a unique situation, and how that will perform with the environmental conditions that are going to be ahead of us, I don't know. But thank heavens that seed is, even though seed is short, I suspect that we're going to plant a little bit less pounds per acre because of the seed size profile.
I stopped by a couple places cutting seed, and years past they just had that flow going pretty heavily across that cutter.
Now they're really slow getting every piece that they can get out of that potato and that, so just slowing down a little bit on the cutter end of it, so.
Trying to do as good a job as they can.
Get
and-
whatever they
Yep.
can get out of that seed, you know.
Yes.
So, yeah,
Do you think a little bit of the age of the seed being, I mean, coming through last year, I would have thought maybe a little younger coming out of the
think
ground. Does that tend to help us?
I think it will. Obviously, when the seed size profile is smaller, that would indicate more, or I should say, less aged seeds. So that could be a benefit. We're going to have a lot less 3 cuts this year because of the seed profile as well, and that's always a good thing. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how this performs, because I think it is physiologically younger than it was last year by far.
Which might make up the difference a little bit on that vigorsome to come out.
So,
So,
yeah, which is ironic. We were so much earlier planting last year. We're going to be a lot later planting, but if we are blessed with 4 or 5 weeks of really fairly decent weather, we might be out of the ground in the same time with a lot healthier plant.
you kind of chill that seed in the ground if it's sitting there that long. That doesn't help it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen in the past where we've been in wet weather,
Mhm.
planted the potatoes, and then it quit raining and it warmed up, and they planted, and that stuff was just planted just a couple of weeks ago, and then one's been in there for 5 or 6
Exactly.
weeks, pop up.
Oh, yeah.
These pop up faster.
Yep, and we've seen that over the years.
Right. Exactly right.
Yeah.
It makes me a little nervous as, as I go up and ride. I was up on top of a mountain down by Grace Saturday, looking at it about, we were at 9,000 feet and looking out across that whole valley, and it was just as white as white. There was no brown anywhere, and I'm sure that's starting to change now. But I start to look at all that snow that's gonna come off, and I bet you we were on top of 14, 15 feet. And you get that starting to melt and go into the atmosphere a little bit, what's that gonna do? Are we gonna have the rain that we had like in that 97?
Yeah, it's-
So we're gonna have a window, I think, if we get going, we gotta
Yeah.
go.
I flew in on Monday from California into Idaho Falls, and then up where the houses are up on the hill, it was all brown, and then above that on that plateau, clear to like Palisades, it was just pure white.
It's crazy.
It's just a ton
beautiful.
of snow. Ton
Yeah,
of snow.
we've been blessed with, and I wonder if our water experts have maybe even underestimated the water value and content of that snowpack. I'd be surprised if we don't have some river flooding.
Oh, I can
That
see.
would, well, this year's the first time early in the season that when you got stuck or you were playing and you started digging, that snow had a blue tint to it. And usually it doesn't that early. It does later, but it seemed like it had some water content early.
That's great. That's great to
So-
hear.
And you can see the river is kind of full also.
Yes.
Yep.
It's got more
River's starting to
water
go.
going through. And
Yeah.
American Falls, it's full. I mean, it's raised up pretty good since what I saw earlier.
And I think Palisades was looking at 60% now or somewhere right in that ballpark. Or,
Yeah, with all the controversy with the groundwater districts in the western irrigation districts, I don't know what to think of it, but I'm kind of a novice at this thing, but it sure looks like to me, I think that they've underestimated this watershed a little bit.
yes. Well, and they're going to play it on that side, which I don't blame them because
Yeah.
you want to fill it and
Right.
make sure it gets through. But
That's
yeah.
true.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
yeah, it will be interesting, but there's no doubt our soil profile is nice and saturated.
Yes.
We've had a lot of good moisture, and
What have you seen on soil temp so far? You've probably been checking the last couple of days.
yeah, in some sand ridges the other day, there was some probes done that the soil temperature was 50 degrees on Monday.
So
It's warming up. Like
Yeah.
I say, the soils will warm up. The coarser soils will obviously warm up a lot faster, but these heavier soils, I think, are probably not even 40 yet. I just don't know.
Still coming out of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I drove around yesterday and you could see the fields out there, you know, like out there is just saturated with moisture. And
Yeah.
you can see it's cold out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's going to help us on our water too, because we're obviously quite a few weeks away from.
Well, you remember last year,
Yeah,
I mean,
we
people were clamoring and couldn't irrigate until the 1st of April last year, and there were winter wheat fields that needed moisture before that. And look,
Yes.
the difference that we have this year. Wow.
What are you seeing on the winter wheat crop? As I drive around, I see it looks like we've got some winter kill.
Yeah, I think that
In
we're going to
there.
be replanting a lot more than we did last year. But these last 2 days have made some fields look tolerable. You know, you're always anxious to get out there and survey the situation. And 10 days ago, everything looked really bad. It's looking a little bit better, but there's going to be a lot of reseeding.
That's I drove around. That's what I've kind of seen. So
Yeah, there's been a fair bit of snow mold, particularly the earlier planted stuff's, I think, more susceptible than the later planted stuff. And so I think that, well, I don't know if there'll be a run on seed, but they're sure going to use a lot more than last year.
yes. So we talked a little bit maybe starting, but what are you kind of seeing in the acreage? What you kind of feel as far as potato acreage in your area? I know just kind of listening around, I'm sure we're going to be up a little bit.
Yeah, well, like we were mentioning before, out of just curiosity, I've kind of conducted a straw poll of potato acreage just for probably the last 20 or 30 years with just the fellows that I work with that I know their last year's crop versus this coming year. And it's turned out to be the perfect microcosm of the Idaho potato acreage. I don't know why, but it just has seemed that way. Well, this year, after doing that straw poll, it was in the neighborhood of 5 or 6% more this year. But because of the, you know, again, we're only talking X amount of acres, so a few hundred acres can really change that number. And some of these growers are struggling to get seed, and if they don't, that number could easily just be equal to last year. But I would anticipate, it looks like to me that there's an increase in acreage.
And do you think the water situation, I know that was some of the acreage reduction last year. With that water situation now,
Well, I can only
not being a problem.
speak for the fellows I work with, and doesn't look like that's going to be something that's going to prevent planting this year on this side of the state.
But I actually visited with another gentleman today, and he's actually going to go up a little bit, maybe 10%, but it's because of the acreage that he had set aside last year because he didn't dare put potatoes in that because of water. And this year he
Had extra seed, and he found seed for that.
Yeah, so, and I've got a couple situations like that with the farmers that I work with too. So, I mean, I don't like the acreage to come up, but we're sure starting this marketing season, or will be, with the shelves bare, if you know what I mean, from last year's crop.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No, I got word it sounded like the majority of the potatoes in North Dakota that would be another 2 or 3 months are going to be gone this month.
Wow.
So you're hearing that all over. So that's a good sign as far as, like you say, the pipeline is not going to be full. So Washington, it sounds like they're
Behind a little bit, aren't they?
They're a little behind they're going to be caught. They've had good weather. They haven't had any nasty weather this year for planting wise, but you know, they'll be done probably in that Pasco area by the end of next week.
Wow.
Probably.
So,
They're Quincy and all that area, Moses Lake, they're just getting going over there. So, but they've had good weather there. Had a couple snowy days, but it just melted fast, and they just kept planting along.
what do you see the acreage over there? Is it hard to tell?
You know, I haven't talked, but I think it's going to be about the same. I don't know if there's going to be an increase over there, but what I was told is about the same. So everyone's kind of hush-hush about their acreage.
I know, and I hate to say anything because we all want good pricing, but maybe it'll help people not plant as much. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
What are some of your recommendations for this spring? I mean,
wow. Even though the problems that we seem to have had the previous growing season seem to be fresh on our mind, and like most good producers, we're preparing ourselves to react to those problems so that we can minimize them if they reoccur. So, and undoubtedly, they're not going to reoccur, and we're going to be faced with a whole set of other problems that we weren't prepared for. But with that being said, looking at some of the issues that we had last year with the heat, I think that irrigation still, to me, is paramount. Good seed obviously is the most important input in the crop by itself. So I think people just need to be really careful about how they get their seed cut and prepared. I think because of the lateness, I think some people may space their seed out just a little bit farther this year, and I think that's going to be a real common thing. Not only
Is that a good thing?
you know, if we're a short season here on this side of the state, definitely. And the fact that we're paying $25 a sack for seed doesn't hurt to stretch it out a little farther too.
Yeah.
So I think that that's going to be one of the things that most people are going to talk about. You know, it's still size is what we need with good quality, and I think even though the crop was okay size-wise, it seemed like we were a little short on the size on a lot of our fields.
And it kind of depended on soil type, it
Right,
seemed,
exactly.
and variety.
Right. You know, the Norcotas in the sand seemed to perform very consistent to years prior, but you know, the calcareous, heavier soils that, you know, maybe have a hint of salt issues, they struggled a lot last year again. So that was 2 years in a row that we've felt that. I'm hoping that our salt levels have been minimized by the winter we've had, and so, yeah. And I've kind of been on a kick. To me, that seems to be one of our biggest enemies in potato production the last 2 years because of the weather. Salts have really hurt us.
We haven't pushed that through the profile.
No, and so we're going to make, you know, my recommendations would be to be on that type of soil to be very careful, which means nitrogen management. Maybe we just make sure that we've got tubers coming before we really get with it, and you know, use the tools that are out there to help minimize salt. And you know, that starts, if you haven't done it and you didn't work on those issues last fall, then that you know, limits what you can do for salt mitigation this spring. But hopefully we'll be in a lot better situation with our soils because of the winter.
Which I could see moisture too. If we get on this ground too quick, we're
Right.
going to cause.
Some problems that way too, yeah, because you know, we've been blessed with a nice moist condition, and that's an interesting comment because people are going to be really anxious, and I hope they don't push it too fast because that can cause just as much problems. So.
You go in the yards now, everything's lined up, all the tractors, everything is lined up.
They're idling.
Yeah, one puff of smoke, everyone's going to take off, you know.
It's going to be like the NASCAR.
Yeah, it's NASCAR, yeah.
Who's going to announce the race?
Yeah, one little puff of smoke and the neighbor's going to be going after it, so.
Well, you can't let them, you know, you just got to be in there. You don't want to miss it.
No.
It'd be funny to take a tractor and a potato planter down the road.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you can stir up a lot of
Yeah.
interest there.
That'd be funny.
What does he do
Oh,
with
yes.
this?
Well, it's interesting. The other night I saw a tractor going up by Yukon, disking a field, which I knew it was gravelly field, but that was the first tractor I really saw on this side take off. So.
Well, I'm going to use a comment. I had my yard power raked on Monday, and by that night, my neighbors had their lawnmowers out. They started work, so I started a fad, got going in there, that stuff. So yeah.
And you could sit on the back porch and just,
Yeah, I just
drink a cup of lemonade and
Nobody watches their neighbors, do they?
No, not at all.
No.
That's funny.
You're doing that wrong.
It really does. So, go ahead.
So you're not seeing any, as far as fertilizer challenges for the spring? Like last year, we were talking about some shortages and chemical being some short.
And that looks pretty stable. So I think we're going to be in good shape that way. We thought we might have some issues with a couple of the chemicals, but they seem to be, the late springs kind of helped us out that way. So I think we're going to, I just don't see any issues out there that are a big concern when it comes to supply for fertilizer and chemicals for that matter. We've got a lot of new tools out there that I hope people look at you know, it seems like every year we have quite a few more, and so I think that people need to do their homework and find out there might be some things out there that would help. I think that's important as well.
Technology-wise, are you're seeing some more more things come on the market that way.
Yeah, always it seems like. So I was with a grower the other day that had just purchased a brand new grain drill, and I was tickled to see some of the modifications that they'd done on this grain drill, which thrilled me. I finally, someone's actually done something with a grain drill that I really, really like. The typical metering wheel just kind of globs of seed and just kind of, like we've talked before, just a controlled spill is all it was.
Yep.
But some of these, this drill I was looking at actually had cups on each side that were staggered that would simulate, to a degree, singulation in a grain drill. And I was just really thrilled with that concept.
Nice.
And on that same drill, the drop hoses from the metering wheel were smooth inside. They weren't that corrugated thing, and so which would allow the seed to drop gracefully without bouncing off the sides on the way down. So I think, and I'm hoping, that that will mean a more uniform disbursement of seed down the green row. And I was really thrilled with that. And that's, to me, is a big deal.
Oh, yes. But it is, because grain drills haven't changed a lot in
No, they haven't. And
30 years.
so I was pretty tickled. I haven't seen what Magic Spudnik has done on their equipment yet. So
Well, we are playing with a new planter.
okay,
It's more of the belt style planter that is going to be more of a population type.
Okay.
No skips. You'll probably get a little bit on the double side,
okay,
but for a grower that's after quantity and yield and more processor type, we're excited about that.
well that's nice.
Which is a difference in our speed. I mean, we had it up to 7 miles an hour last spring, and
Wow.
it was planting, because you're not doing it with a cup and the seed doesn't bounce like you're trying to.
Right. So it's a belt.
So it's a belt
Kind of
concept.
like a European style.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
So what it does is it actually feeds in. We still have the feed chains like we do to feed it, and then it feeds into a hopper, and then that belt goes forward with kind of a rubber band type deal that starts to singulate the seed out,
Okay.
and then what seed falls off comes back around, and it just keeps pulling
Oh.
it through. And then it has kind of a wheel up front, and we can set the spacing, but it kind of allows the drop so that it slows it down to get it singulated down through.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah,
We're
working
excited.
on the cut seed too,
It's-
the cutting
Yeah.
of it, because those are used for a single drop type deal, but we're
Right.
using it for a cut seed type deal, trying to get that perfection.
So in fact, we're going to probably have it. One of the ones will probably start next week
Mhm.
up in Alberta,
Yeah.
so that we can get a little fill. We did about 300 acres with it last year, so it gave us a little bit of information, and now we just want to verify what we're seeing.
Well, in the vegetable industry, and I think a lot of it has to do because of the seed size, they've done so many things to prime the seed and get to that singulation that the corn planters and the soybean planters do. And it feels like in the potato and the small grains, we're just throwing it in. And so I think that that's something that the industry needs to, and it sounds like you guys are approaching
Yeah.
there, so.
Well, and I think it's exactly what you say. We start to find with corn and soybeans, that seed count and the population per acre is huge. I mean, yield, and according to variety, you find out that you need X amount of seed population. And that's what we're kind of shooting for here on this particular planter. We actually have weigh scales on it as well, so that we could plant at a poundage per acre as well.
That's great. I mean, you think that an average acre spud has about 14,000 seed pieces or thereabouts, or a little bit less or a little bit more. A corn has 40,000 or less or more, who knows. But small grains, on the other hand, you're talking 1 million to 1.5 million seeds per acre. So there's still a lot of work to be done in that arena. So the potatoes of all of them should be the most likely to have the more accurate spacing. So
Exactly.
that's your quest, isn't it?
Yes, it is. We want to keep moving forward on that, and I think it is. It's one of those things that we have to keep tapping into that to keep the production moving forward. I mean, as an agronomist, you're always reaching for those tools, a new tool each year to try to make that so that we can get the yield we need and keep us profitable, to keep us farming. And you know what's interesting was I'm going back to my farming days. We were out at Monsanto, and Monsanto, we were in there when they were doing the gene splits and all that, and getting corn ready to be Roundup ready back then.
Right.
Now, of course, most of it is. But they made the comment, they says, if we don't do this, we will not be able to feed the world. And of course, here you are, a young farmer going, I'm getting $3 for wheat. My potatoes, maybe I get $1.50 to $4, you know, and we're just squeaking by. You're just making it. And I kept thinking, maybe we need that shortage come quicker so that we can get profitable. But I think we're seeing some of that now as we are having to feed the world. We have got to be good at what we're doing.
Right.
And we've got to promote that as we continue to let people know that we're doing it in a good way.
And that's a good point.
To make sure that they're getting a quality.
Because we really do. Those of us who sell chemicals, I have a nephew that won't even talk to me. I should say a nephew-in-law won't even talk to me because I sell pesticides. And so we've got a target on our back, and unjustly so, there's no question about that. But everything that we can do to get more out of that acre and still maintain an ecological and environmental plus there, I think that's important.
I think it is. It was interesting. We had the millennial farmer out here, and I got to visit with him for a little bit in one of our podcasts.
Yeah.
And I think what he kind of talked a little bit about is that every day on the farm, showing what we're doing and doing some of those things. And I'm grateful for that generation, because I'm not the one that's going to click on a video all the time of what we're doing. But I think that helps people understand what we're doing, and I think that needs to get out, because really there's not a lot of the population that's in the farming sector that actually sees what's happening on the ground.
That's why we're looking like for now, 5 years, in 5 years now, what we can advance in 5 years right now. So we're looking into the future for us.
And it's been so interesting to watch. I mean, it's gotten worse, I think, as far as our social environment. I don't know if because people have more money or they have more time, I don't know what it is, but it seems like the people that talk and yell the loudest get all the attention. And so and if they're not getting attention, they'll come up with something that will get them attention. And you know, fortunately for us, as in the agriculture, I think some of the spotlight's gone to more of the social side of our world now than it has our food side. But my gosh, it's still so important. And anything that I believe this, anything that makes good agronomic sense pushes all the right buttons. And I'm talking about sustainability, food safety, and economics. So I believe that with all my heart, and now we just got to convince the markets that they'll allow us to do it that way.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree.
In your last 10 years, 40 years, let's go 40 years, you've seen a yield increase, or at least quite a difference in how we farm compared to what we did 40 years ago.
Exactly.
I think we used to throw a lot of things at it just saying it needed it. And now we're more site specific on what we're doing. But where do you think we've got to go in the next 10? Just kind of looking from your past to your career, the next 10 years that we need to be looking at.
Well, I think because it is the most important input of a crop, I think it has to start with seed first. Varietal changes. I'm all for, if we can convince the rest of the world, for genetically modified traits in seed that can not only help us control pests with less herbicides, or less pesticides, but also improve the food quality as well. I think that there's basically 2 or 3 ways to do that. Plant genetics is one, and hybrids and breeding plants is another. But I think that that's where we've seen the biggest gains so far. Although in potatoes, we're still raising Father Time and our russet Burbanks here. It's been around forever. Because they can't come up with anything that tastes as good. That's the problem.
That's the problem. We actually was talking about that earlier today. If that potato would have been introduced in the last 10 years, it would be gone.
It would. And it's fun. Isn't that crazy? It would have never made the grade, would it?
No, it wouldn't have made the cut.
So I think that's where it's got to start. I think that seed and what we do there, resistant traits to diseases are a big thing as well. Even resistant to living pests like insects and nematodes and wireworm and all those other things. I think that's where it needs to continue, and I think there's a lot of money being part. I think another sector that we tend to poke fun at sometimes, and I know that I've been guilty of that over the years, is the biological side of agriculture. You'll notice almost every major chemical company now has a division in the biological side. And I think that we're just now getting really confident in some of the things that we're doing. And so I think that is an important advance that we need to do. On the equipment side, you guys, I think, are headed in the right direction. We need to get more efficient in how we plant and how we work the ground. And so those are some really big issues as well. All the factors in agronomy, I think those are some of the main ones that are so important.
Do you think in the last 5 we've kind of plateaued on potato yield?
Seems that we have, but
I mean, just me thinking. I just was wondering what your.
Well, I mean, again, Mother Nature is the great agronomist.
She's going to dictate the crop
You're
in the.
still the godfather.
Oh yeah.
Just remember that.
So we'll give the growers an offer they can't resist here. But we're learning. Right now, we're at a stage on our side of the state, and this would be considered crop failure on the western side and Washington and Oregon. But most of these growers now are disappointed if they don't get a 400 sack yield in any variety. And so that's a big deal. And so have we plateaued a little bit? Maybe yes, because we've had 2 really tough years, but I think Mother Nature had more to blame than anybody in that situation.
So going forward, if we have, say we have another winter, I mean, we could have back-to-back winters similar to what we just had. I'm looking up at Manitoba. Manitoba now is on their second winter. They were a drought, and now they've had 2 years of pretty heavy snow. And they're going to be late coming into the field as well. I look at that, if we repeat this cycle again this fall, it's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, I mean, I would love it. I'd welcome another wet fall because I think it's healthy for our soil to get that kind of moisture, as long as it doesn't keep us out of the field too late.
Nice.
Yeah, so if we're going to get better yields in southeastern Idaho with a typical average year, I think that the biggest hope for that is varietal.
Kind of what you were talking about.
I think that's
getting the genetics in the varieties to be able to.
We've got a lot of smart people out there that raise potatoes now, and a lot of them know all the tricks, but they're still at the mercy of what the weather and Mother Nature will throw their way. But it seems like to me, and there's some phenomenal varieties coming out there now that really look promising, but they all seem to have their own Achilles heel, and so it's really tough to.
Well, and sometimes you don't find it the first year.
Yeah, no kidding.
It can be the second or third
That's so
year.
frustrating because a lot of times it takes you 4 or 5 years to figure out a variety, and that could be said even in small grains as well, and that's frustrating. The same with corn as too. But I've always said that the most successful growers adhere to the basics religiously, and then they are the ones that are quick to recognize what the current growing season is throwing them and have the humility to maybe alter their preconceived course for that year. and that's scary because, you know, we don't want to shoot our own selves in the foot. You know, speaking fertility-wise, the last 2 years, we probably have overdone our nitrogen applications on potatoes. And that's really hard to say, I don't want to put quite that much on there, because prior to these last 2 years, that would have shot you in the foot too. And so, and you could say that just about anything, you know, with pest control and all the other factors that we deal with. So I think you stick with the basics to start out and be adaptable during the growing season. There's certain constants all the way through every growing season, and you know, good seed, good moisture, those never change. But with the moisture thing, though, you can certainly underdo it or overdo it.
And this could be the year where we got some deep moisture that we'll have to watch and really monitor our irrigation practices.
That's a good point. Really good point.
Yeah,
So,
have to maintain it.
and so, and with the current issues that we have with the competing irrigation districts in our state, it would be nice to have a year that we didn't have to use this much water. Maybe we could quiet this this war that's going on right now a little bit. So
We can flush more water down for the fish.
there you go. Well, there's good potato growers over there too. So so
We want to have enough all the way across. You know, and it's interesting. We've had some people come from other countries and actually look at the system that we're in. I mean, they look at our water storage. They look at how we send it down the river and we shoot it out into the ocean. And it's been interesting to listen to some of them say, "You'll learn one day how to manage water. You haven't quite done it yet."
Are you serious?
So I
We're
thought
not
that
there
was
yet.
very interesting. He says, you'll learn as you have to come up against the challenges of making sure that you have enough water for residential and all that kind of stuff, and cities, as well as agriculture and everything that's using the water. Because we ship a lot of it to the ocean and it goes right through.
Yeah.
So, but I thought that was interesting to hear that.
Yeah. So we still waste water, bottom line.
Yes. Yep.
But I personally have a lot of strong opinions about some of these areas. Flood irrigation is the least efficient version of irrigation, and so, but you know, there are some crops that actually do really well under that type of irrigation. So, it's beyond my wisdom to tell what needs to be done in that arena. That's for sure.
Well, and I think it's a year to year. I mean, you got to kind of watch what it's doing year to year. With obviously this year we got a lot of moisture. The year before we didn't. Right. So you have to kind of manage that, right. Which is exciting that we have some of those tools, but we obviously will get better over time.
No question about that. One of the things that I wanted to bring out in our talk today, I'd like to talk a little bit about soil fumigation in potatoes. Last fall, I think across the board we saw less of it because the cost had gone up so much. And we're making strides, I think, in our industry to, not that I'm against fumigation entirely or anything like that. It has its place, but you know, there's 3 or 4 main reasons that a person would fumigate. Obviously, you know, if you've got insect issues, you know, like wireworm, you know, that would be one, or nematodes, and even for some perennial weed control, and then also soil-borne diseases and plant health. But we're finding other substitutes in some of those arenas, like for plant health, for interesting, that I think may allow us to maybe drift away from some fumigation. We're always very concerned, and I know this is a debatable subject about particularly the metam products, because you know they kill everything almost in the soil, and then of course,
good and your bad.
Right, and you know, there's been arguments saying, well, the biology comes back immediately, and I said, I'm not a biologist, and I don't know that for sure, but if it does come back, I've wondered, have we done something to alter the natural biology balance in those soils. And so I've been kind of on a personal kick to try to come up with ideas that would be a good alternative for fumigation for plant health and plant vigor. And at the same time, you increase that, then your ability to deal with the pests are eased as well.
What would you say right now, I mean, on your acre base that you're consulting, what is the percentage of fumigant?
It had dropped a lot last year.
It did drop.
Yeah, so I think 10 years ago, I would say that 80% of the ground was being fumigated, and I bet you last year we were well below 50% for the fellows I work with. But we're coming up with ideas and trying to help ourselves, and some of these varieties that we deal with now seem to do better without, do almost as well without fumigation. You know, I still think the variety that seems to want more fumigation than others is the russet Burbank. It seems like we still fumigate a lot of those fields, but I know that with the advances in biological programs and products and being educated that way, I think we're making gains in that area. I hope so, because I think it pushes all the right buttons when it comes to our environment.
Are you using cover crop? Is that one that you've kind of looked into as well? Or?
Yeah, and there's some benefit to that. I mean, we're a little limited because of our growing season, but cover crops are great. We've got manure, and we've obviously got compost, which is a really good thing too. But you've got to be careful about how you use those too. But all that's becoming more and more popular. I don't know if we're saving any money by doing those type of things, but
it's environmentally.
Yeah, I think it's better for the soil health in some regards. Because let's face it, two of the crops that we raise a lot of in our area are sugar beets and potatoes. And I can't think of two crops that are harder on the soil health than those two. And I'm talking soil tilt and structure.
Yeah,
so
you don't get organic matter out of either one of those crops.
You just beat the living tar out of the soil,
Yep.
getting the crop out. And so we need to be mindful, and I think that most growers are starting to kind of look back and say, okay, well, maybe we need to take a little bit closer look at how we take care of our soils. You know, I used to, with fumigation, I remember when we started fumigating with the Metam products, we started cheating our rotations because we thought that was the end-all, beat-all kind of a thing. And for a while there, I was as guilty as anybody, saying, yeah, if you're fumigating, you can go every other year with potatoes. And now I think we're all wising up a little bit. That wasn't the right thing to go do. So
stretch that out 2, 3.
Yeah, and then be more conscious of what we're doing in the soil. Unfortunately, with potatoes and sugar beets, we have to do certain things. Those two crops do not do well in minimum tillage. We've just got to be a little bit smarter, I think, as we approach this. So.
No, I think that's good. The other thing, probably looking through the season, from what you've kind of talked about, is probably to look at this nitrogen level with this soil and kind of starting where we're at, kind of look at the fertility side of splitting that out.
We may find that our soil nitrates are lower than we've had in the last. And if our soil salts are lower, I mean, that might give us an opportunity we may have to react to that. So we may need more for the season. But certainly we need to keep track of what we're doing and test and just know what we're up against. I think that's a big thing that we need to be aware of. I see some trends out there that are happening in fertility-wise in our soils, and it may be by the way that people fertilize. Micronutrients I think are making a resurgence, and we've always paid attention to those, but sometimes maybe we haven't been as active on trying to make sure that we're covering all our bases. And so I think that that's another thing that we need to keep a closer eye on than we have in the past. So, there's some, we've made a lot of gains in our industry for foliar products and the understanding of what forms we need to use. And also marrying those products with biologicals have really made a big difference. I know last spring we talked a little bit about the onset of kelp. Yes. And there was nothing that happened last year that wavered my belief in that type of a product. I think it has some amazing benefits, and so I think people need to be looking at some of these non-traditional type products and see for themselves. I mean, I'm not about to ask anyone to just do it, but they need to investigate and look and try and see if it's something that would benefit their program.
Well, I can remember back, it's been a while, back in the early 2000s when we were spreading fertilizer there and we started using humic.
Yeah, everybody thought, what a snake oil that was.
Oh yeah, I remember putting that many pounds on, and
yeah,
I thought that's not going to work, but boy, now it's proved to be a really good product.
Yeah, and that's true. One of the things that we noticed our company, we sell a really good line of biologicals, and we've kind of, again, it's been a little unpredictable sometimes. One field will respond so well and the next one won't, and we've kind of come to the conclusion that we need to be feeding this biology as we try to stimulate it in our soil or introduce it to our soils. And so that even brings the need for humic products even more so, because they're a great food source for biology. And so I think that kind of needs to be a component if you're going to start using some of these biologicals. And there's some that are really good and some that are horrible, I suspect, just like everything. But you need to understand that they are an organism that needs a plant, a feed on, exactly. And so, and as I look back at some of the programs that I've been involved with, if we've had any failures or inconsistencies, it might have been because we did not look at that side of it as a food source with that biology. So, so I think we've got a lot to learn still.
Oh yes, every year is a learning curve.
Right. So,
Something changes every year.
exactly.
Yes, it does.
Remember when you first started until where it is now, it's totally different.
It's just so different.
When you're moving pipe and the sprinklers,
Oh.
and the soil.
Oh my gosh, those are the good old days.
Yeah.
Huh?
Andy was cussing in the field at that point,
Oh yeah.
The flies and the mosquitoes and the deer flies coming after you.
Hot. Yeah.
Well, you were part of the bus
Ride. Yeah.
the bus ride out
Yeah.
to the farm.
Out to
So
farms.
oh my gosh, if I remember right, you were the blue bus, weren't you?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were on the brown bus.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we'd 5 o'clock in the morning, we're passing each other, throwing pop bottles and everybody at each other.
Yeah. Oh, those are the days. My gosh.
That was fun. Those were some
Ooh.
fun days. So
Yeah. Hook and latch and the ball and socket and all that good stuff.
Out there squeaking and squealing trying to get them out.
those were some fun days.
Oh yes.
But yeah, it's all good though.
Yeah.
I'm glad we don't have them again.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
me too. Boy, amen there.
I don't know if I keep up now, so.
I know I couldn't.
I couldn't even get out of the bus.
You'd be driving the
Yeah.
bus.
I remember one time we put the pipe between the windows to carry to the next field, and it was dark, and the kid was laying on it, and I won't say the bus driver, but there's 2 trees, and it hit that, and it knocked that kid, and unfortunately he was okay, but unfortunately he gave him a couple days off, and we had to do his lines on top of our lines, and oh my loss.
And in the meantime, you had to go get another piece of
Yeah,
pipe.
another pipe, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it was all mangled up.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Oh
good.
yeah.
Mm,
Well, good way to get in shape.
Yeah.
yes, it is.
Yes,
I think I could use a little more of that.
I know I could too.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially after Saturday when we dug a couple of them out. I'm out of shape.
Mm, yes. So,
I was finding oxygen in the bag.
Oh, yeah.
They make those little cans of oxygen now you can carry.
Did you actually use some of those?
I do.
I'm gonna have to try that out. So.
Yeah, a couple of shots of that, and I felt like I could go again. So amazing where we've come, huh?
I know. It's sad almost, that's for sure.
Back in my days, you had to just put your hands over your head and just suck up the air you can get back into your lungs.
Yeah, we love it, that's for sure.
Well, kind of wrapping things up, crystal ball. I'm going to ask both of you this. Crystal ball, what do you think this year's going to do?
That's a good one there. I think, my opinion, I think once we get the weather and everything, I think it'll catch up. It won't be like on target, but we'll be caught up on that standpoint there. I keep my fingers crossed. I hope it's a good crop and everything else, but.
I think I would agree. I hope that we can get them in like we used to. I mean, I think that's where we're at. We're back 10 or 15 years because everything has just kind of moved up over the last few years. So I think Mother Nature hopefully will cooperate with us. We'll get them in at a fairly reasonable time. And I would like to have a nicer, a little bit more, less abusive summer. And maybe that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, back
right.
in the olden days.
Yeah, so.
The olden days. Well, back in our days, it was September 1. They were just starting to ready to cut grain.
I know.
And in October, that's when we started to dig potatoes.
Yeah.
And that, so.
We moved that up.
Now
because we
they're-
got bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we're going to have a challenging potato year because of the way it's starting. I mean, we're going to have to deal with some things that we are going to obviously be surprised with. I think anything that we can do this spring, particularly with potatoes, that will allow them to get out of the ground as quick as possible. So I'd really admonish people to watch their seeding depths, make sure they're not seeding too deep. I think I'm a proponent of maybe spacing it out just a teeny bit, maybe a ½ inch, I don't know. Making sure that you plant as well as you possibly can as far as spacing and slow down. I know that's what you guys don't want to hear, but
No,
boy, we've got to slow down with our planters. I don't
we've
care.
got to be accurate.
We've got to be
That's-
accurate.
That's part of planning.
Yeah. And then as they emerge, we're just going to have to be really careful because I think we have potentially a short season ahead of us. But you know, that could all change. It really can. But if we end up with that type of season, we need to be really on the ball with the water and the fertility. So paying close attention to those little minute things are going to pay big dividends, and they always do. You know, I don't know what type of pest problems we're going to be faced with this summer, but all the more reason to make sure that we start out well.
Yes.
So the Speaker of the House, what do you?
Yeah,
your
what are you
prediction?
thinking?
What do I think?
Yeah. You want to go buy a lottery ticket?
I never have won a lottery, so I'm kind of in agreement with what you're saying. I think this is more of a spring that I think we've been used to
Yes.
10, 15 years ago. I still think if we can get in the ground in May, it's amazing what these potatoes and grain and all that with Mother Nature, if it's all right from there on out, we have a mild summer. I think we could be right in good, I think we're in good shape for the yields, and I think we're in good shape for, I think some of the disease and some of the other issues, because winter sometimes takes care of that because of going through a cold. We've been cold. It hasn't allowed a lot of that to continue to go forward. And I think we're starting out great shape with moisture that's deep. Obviously pivots like that because you don't get behind as quick if you don't have to catch up. So I'm kind of optimistic. I think we're going to have a good year.
Yeah. No, I agree too.
You make some good points. And we have to realize that Mother Nature's time clock isn't days and calendar days. It's growing degree units. Of course, we found the last 2 years, too many at one time is not good either. So,
The plant can't take in that much.
well, I mean, corn and those type of crops love that kind of thing. But generally speaking, our small grains and potatoes prefer cooler weather and for quality and yield potential, I think, particularly in the grain market. But so if Mother Nature behaves herself, I think we'll have a really good quality crop, and I think that's the most important part.
I know last year we talked a lot about soil moisture and also temperature wise. And the last couple of years, we've been awful high in that soil temperature range.
Just hurt us.
Yeah, so maybe with what we're going forward, we could beat the last 2 years.
Right. So,
That's what I'm hoping. Well, thank you, Gary, for
Well, man,
for
my
spending
pleasure.
some time. We sure appreciate you coming. And
yeah, so we'll see what this year goes.
yes,
Good seeing you.
Oh, thank you very much.
Be safe.
thanks for Andy to
Yeah, thank
come
you
and
for what
join
you're
us.
doing. I'm not much
and-
for this kind of stuff, but it was interesting.
Well,
Well, it's always fun to sit and visit with Gary. He's
oh, that's too kind. So may it be a nice, forgettable season.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
yes, indeed. I am going to say I'm going to go check the water situation out at least 1 or 2 more times just to make
Keep
sure
us
we're
posted.
okay.
You're such a team player.
Get your oxygen bottle.
And I'll take the
If you get to
oxygen
that
bottle
age, you
because
need
we
it.
will be up at probably 10,000 feet at that point.
Wow, that's crazy. So it'll be fun.
Well, we'd like to thank everyone for joining us, and as spring starts, we wish each of you a very successful spring and be safe out there. I know it's going to be fast and furious, and make sure that you guys always watch what you're doing and stay safe, and we appreciate you tuning in. Have a great day and a great spring.